I grew up in a quiet West Virginia town where everyone knew each other and bad news always seemed to belong to somewhere else. When I finally left for college in 2021, I wanted more. Not chaos, not a big city, but independence. The university was only 15 minutes from home, in a small town that wasn't much bigger than mine. The pandemic had warped everything: classes, social life, even housing. Most students rented apartments or commuted, but I didn't want to stay with my parents, and I didn't have money for my own place. Dorms were my only option. The first day, I dragged my suitcase down a hallway that felt far too quiet for a campus. Most doors were shut. No music, no laughter, just heavy silence. My assigned room was cracked open. Inside, my new roommate sat at her desk, face lit by her phone. She looked up, gave me a faint smile, then back down. We'd texted a little before move-in, nothing deep. I remember her first words. "Everyone had their own rooms last semester. I did too until you joined." It wasn't hostile, not friendly either, just blunt. I laughed awkwardly, tried to change the subject, but she barely spoke after that. Over the next week, I learned she hardly stayed in the room. Most nights she was with her boyfriend. That suited me fine. I thought maybe we'd find a rhythm. But the first weekend set a pattern I'd never forget. I went home Friday, returned early Monday around 6. She was asleep, back to me. I climbed onto my lofted bed and dropped my bag to the floor. I started drifting off when I felt it, the mattress dipping. At first I told myself it was just the foam shifting, but no, the pressure lingered, like someone leaning their weight onto the corner. My eyes stayed shut, heart pounding. Then the pressure lifted. I finally glanced at her, still in bed, facing the wall. I told myself it was exhaustion. The next weekend, same routine. Back Monday morning, same time. Within minutes of lying down, the mattress sank again, but heavier this time, like someone sat next to me. I didn't move. My chest locked. After a few seconds, the weight lifted. Then a thud hit the floor, heavy, like someone jumping from a high bed. I snapped my eyes open. My loft was tall. I used a stool to climb it. No way I imagined that. But she lay in her bed, still as stone. Panic scraped at the back of my throat, but I swallowed it. Stress. You're just tired, hallucinating. I clung to that explanation until the third Monday. This time she was angled toward me, eyes shut. I lay down, bracing myself. Minutes passed. Then came the familiar weight. My pulse thundered, but this time something new. A hand on the back of my neck. Light pressure, fingers resting against my skin. Not a squeeze, just undeniable contact. I froze. My breath came shallow. Seconds stretched like hours. Then the hand lifted. The mattress shifted. I dared a glance. She was in her bed, eyes closed, breathing slow. I grabbed my phone and bag and bolted into the hall. My hands shook so bad I could barely dial my mom. The school offered to move me, even mentioned the police. But what could I say? A ghost touched me. I just knew I couldn't stay. Still, pieces nagged at me. She once mentioned a past roommate who didn't last long. I remembered her locked drawer full of prescription bottles. She claimed they were for a skin condition. I wondered. In the new dorm, I finally exhaled. I set up my things, relishing the safety of a locked door. But my mind kept circling back. One evening, she texted, "You left stuff. Come get it." My stomach knotted. I didn't want to go back, but leaving things there felt worse. When I opened the old door, the air felt heavy. She wasn't there. Relief. I grabbed my binder and book, then froze. She was suddenly in the doorway. No sound, just there. I forced a smile. "Hey, just grabbing my stuff." She didn't smile back, didn't move. Just asked, flatly, "Where's your new room?" Something in her tone made my skin crawl. I lied. "First floor." Her head tilted. "Which hall?" I shrugged. "Don't remember." Her eyes lingered too long. Then I shoved past her, nearly running down the hall. That night I braced my new door with a chair. Sleep was impossible. Days passed without sight of her. But paranoia festered. Footsteps paused outside my door. Once, my knob rattled. Another time, a slip of paper was shoved under the door. One word, neat handwriting. Awake? I told myself it was a prank, but my gut screamed otherwise. Then came the night of the chair. I stayed up late finishing an essay. At 2 a.m., I turned off the lamp and crawled into bed. Minutes later, scrape, scrape, the sound of my desk chair moving. I snapped on the light. The chair wasn't against the door anymore. It had been dragged back. The door was still locked. My chest squeezed. I pushed the chair back, checked every corner. Nothing. But the thought lodged deep. What if she was in here? What if she still is? 2 nights later, proof arrived. I woke at 3:14 a.m. to breathing. Not mine, not the hall, inside my room. I turned and saw her, standing at the foot of my bed, eyes open, blank face. For a heartbeat, I thought she was sleepwalking. Then she whispered, "You move too much." My throat clamped shut. She tilted her head, the same tilt when she'd asked where my room was. Then, without touching the lock, she opened my door. It swung as if already unlocked. She slipped out, silent. The next morning, I reported it again. This time, the school promised action. Soon after, I learned she withdrew from classes, vanished from campus. Relief should have come. But fear rooted deeper. The hand on my neck, the note, the whisper, "You move too much." Even now, years later, I wake some nights convinced she's standing at the foot of my bed. After she vanished from campus, I thought maybe it was over. But the paranoia lingered like a shadow. Nights in my new dorm, I'd wake convinced someone stood in the dark. Every creak of the building twisted my nerves. I told myself she was gone, that she couldn't reach me anymore, but I never believed it fully. A week later, I woke to the faint sound of paper sliding across the floor. My stomach clenched. I sat up, turned on the lamp, and saw another slip halfway under the door. This time, 2 words in the same careful handwriting. "Still awake?" My heart hammered. I yanked the chair tight against the door, but sleep was impossible. The next morning, I carried the note to the resident advisor. They stared, uncertain if it was a prank. They promised to check the cameras. Days passed, and no one followed up. But the notes didn't stop. The second arrived folded, wedged into my desk drawer, something I never left open. Inside, "Don't lock it." The third was taped to my bathroom mirror. "You sleep deeper than you think." Each time I reported it. Each time the school nodded, reassured, and nothing changed. I started sleeping in the library, pretending to study. The fluorescent hum was better than my locked door. But eventually, exhaustion forced me back. One night, I triple-checked every lock, shoved the chair hard under the knob, even stacked books so I'd hear them fall if anyone entered. Sometime after 3, I woke to the sound of my desk chair sliding again, slow, scraping. I froze. Then, against the silence, a whisper by my ear. "Told you not to lock it." I shot upright. The room was empty, light from the desk lamp casting long shadows. The chair was back against the desk, the books still stacked. Nothing had moved. But I could still feel breath on my ear. That week I begged the school for a transfer off campus. They agreed reluctantly, citing limited housing. I didn't care, anywhere but here. Moving day came fast. My mom arrived to help, grateful I was leaving. By mid-afternoon, the room was nearly empty, boxes stacked by the door. I turned to grab the last binder off my shelf and froze. She was standing by the window, the same blank face, the same tilt of her head. My mom didn't notice her. She was busy taping a box. My throat locked, words trapped. Then I blinked, and the corner was empty. I told myself stress was breaking me down, but when I checked the window ledge, I found another note, wedged tight under the frame. One word, written in a hurried scrawl this time. "Stay." That night I slept at home, but sleep didn't help. Dreams came, her standing at the foot of my childhood bed whispering, "You move too much." Even awake, I wasn't safe. At the off-campus apartment, the first few weeks were quiet. No notes, no sounds. I started to believe maybe distance had broken whatever tie existed. Then, one evening, I unlocked my new door and found the desk chair already pulled out. A note rested on the seat. "I like this room better." I dropped the key, hands shaking. There was no way she could have known where I lived. I never told anyone but my mom. I left the apartment that night and drove to a friend's, refusing to go back until daylight. The landlord insisted no one had entered, locks intact, no signs of tampering. But I knew. Weeks blurred. Sometimes I caught glimpses, her reflection in a darkened window, her outline in a passing crowd. Always gone when I looked twice. One night, exhausted, I collapsed on my bed, telling myself it was paranoia. I woke hours later with weight pressing on the mattress. The same slow dip. I didn't move. Then the hand, on the back of my neck, exactly the same as that first time. I wanted to scream, to run, but terror glued me down. A whisper grazed my ear. "Don't move this time." When the pressure lifted, I forced my body to roll, desperate to see. The room was empty, but the closet door was ajar. I hadn't opened it. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, my mom begged me to come home permanently. I almost said yes, but part of me knew it wouldn't matter. Wherever I went, she followed. The final straw came weeks later. I returned from class late, bone-tired. The apartment was quiet. I dropped my bag, tossed my keys on the desk. When I turned toward the bed, she was sitting on it, not standing, sitting. Her eyes fixed on me. For the first time, she smiled. Not warm, not human, just stretched lips. Too slow, too deliberate. I backed against the door, fumbling for the knob. She tilted her head, whispered, "You shouldn't have left." I blinked, and the bed was empty. On the pillow lay another note. Awake? That was the last night I spent in that apartment. I moved back home, commuting to classes until I graduated. My parents never asked why. They could see the fear, the exhaustion. Years have passed, and I still don't sleep easily. Sometimes late at night I wake to the faint dip of my mattress. Sometimes I hear paper sliding across the floor, and sometimes I swear I feel the weight of a hand on my neck, light, patient, waiting. The scariest part isn't that she might still be out there. It's the thought that she never left at all. Maybe she was never just a roommate. Maybe she was something else entirely. And maybe she's still waiting for me to answer. It was my junior year of college, and I had the terrible habit of procrastinating. Most students pulled late nights in their dorms, but I often ended up in the business building on campus. It was newer than the other buildings, with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern study lounges, and I liked how quiet it was compared to the library. One night in late October, I stayed longer than I meant to. I was trying to finish a project for my finance class. Graphs, spreadsheets, endless analysis. The sun had set hours ago, and by the time I looked up from my laptop, it was close to 11:30 p.m. The building was usually open 24/7 for students with ID cards, but after 10 p.m., it got eerily quiet. Most of the lights dimmed to save power, leaving only motion sensor lights in the hallways. The whole place felt hollow, as though the walls themselves were swallowing sound. I packed up my laptop and headed toward the elevator, my footsteps echoing a little too loudly. That's when I heard it, the distinct creak of a door shutting somewhere down the hall. I froze. The building should have been nearly empty. I hadn't seen anyone else in hours, not even the cleaning staff. I waited, telling myself it was nothing, maybe just the HVAC system or an automatic door. After a minute, I forced myself to keep walking. But when I pressed the elevator button, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The digital floor indicator showed that the elevator was already on its way down. I hadn't pressed anything yet. Someone else had called it. The ding of the elevator arriving echoed through the empty corridor. The doors slid open with a slow, mechanical groan, revealing Nothing. Just an empty car. Still, I couldn't shake the chill running down my back. I stepped in, pressed the ground floor button, and tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. But the moment the doors closed, I felt it, that prickling sensation, like someone was watching me. The elevator stopped halfway down. The doors opened again. I hadn't pressed any other button. This time, the hallway outside was dark, the motion sensor lights failing to flicker on. I peered out, heart thudding, but saw only a long stretch of shadows. The doors closed again, and the car continued to the ground floor. I nearly ran out when it opened. The lobby was empty, its wide glass windows reflecting the fluorescent ceiling lights. Outside, fog was starting to roll across the campus lawns, making the world beyond the glass look like a painting smudged at the edges. I told myself I was just tired, just on edge. But as I pushed through the front doors, I noticed something strange. Across the lobby, near the entrance to one of the lecture halls, a single door was propped open with a wedge. It hadn't been open earlier, but 2 nights later, I found myself back in the business building again, and that's when things escalated. That night, I promised myself I'd leave earlier. I kept my eyes on the time and packed up around 9:30. The building was still mostly empty, but not oppressively so. I told myself I was safe. When I reached the stairwell, I decided to skip the elevator altogether. The memory of that night still clung to me, and the idea of stepping into that box alone again made my stomach twist. The stairwell was lit by a single buzzing fluorescent bulb, the kind that flickers at random intervals. My footsteps echoed as I descended. Halfway down, I froze. There was another set of footsteps echoing in sync with mine. At first, I thought it was just the acoustics of the stairwell, bouncing my own steps back at me. But when I stopped moving, the other steps didn't. They kept going. Slow, measured, coming closer. I backed up, heart racing, and shoved the door to the 3rd floor open. The hallway lights flickered on with a sterile glow. The stairwell behind me went silent. I stood there, staring at the door, waiting for it to open again. But it didn't. I forced myself to move quickly down the hallway, heading for the far exit. That's when I noticed something that made my chest tighten. Every door I passed had a small rectangular window, and in the window of one classroom, I swear I saw a face watching me. It wasn't moving, just staring. I blinked, and it was gone. I picked up my pace, practically jogging to the exit. When I reached it, I yanked the handle. Locked. That didn't make sense. All exits should have been open until at least midnight. I turned back, pulse hammering, and that's when I heard it again. Footsteps. Closer this time, deliberate. I bolted down the hall, trying another exit. Locked. The panic rising in my throat made it hard to breathe. The footsteps grew louder, echoing from everywhere at once. I glanced back and saw a figure at the far end of the hall, tall, dressed in dark clothing, standing perfectly still, watching me. And then, slowly, a shadow passed across the window. Someone was outside. Someone was looking in. I didn't tell anyone what happened that night. Not the police, not campus security, not even my roommates. How could I? But a week later, I heard whispers around campus. Other students had seen someone lurking in the business building at night. One girl claimed she'd been followed to her dorm. Another swore she'd seen a face in the stairwell window when she was outside. No one ever caught him. If it was a him. To this day, I can't set foot in that building after dark. And sometimes when I'm alone in my apartment, I'll hear it again. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone biding their time. Waiting. My name is Annabelle. I'm 20 years old now, living in the UK, but what I'm about to tell you happened when I was 16. Back then, I was just an ordinary high school student. Quiet, shy, the kind of girl who kept to herself and never really drew attention. But this story isn't about shyness. It's about something that nearly changed my life forever. Something I still have nightmares about. To understand how it happened, you need to know a little bit about my school. It wasn't one of those massive London schools you see in films. It was newer, smaller, tucked away in a suburban town where nothing exciting ever really happened. The building itself looked big from the outside, but that was because it housed 3 completely different schools under one roof: a nursery for toddlers, a special needs school, and our high school. Each section was divided by long hallways and electronic doors. To get anywhere, you needed your student ID lanyard. These cards had our names and pictures on the front, and you had to scan them against the little black screens to open nearly every door in the building. Without one, you weren't supposed to be able to move beyond the foyer. We were told over and over again, "Don't let anyone in if you don't know them. Don't hold the door open. Always wear your ID." Of course, most students never listened. Kids flipped their lanyards backwards so you couldn't see their name or face. Others left them dangling in their bags. And, like every school rule, it became more of a suggestion than a requirement. The day this happened was only my 2nd full day at the new school. I'd been sick during the first week of classes, so I was already behind. I was still figuring out where everything was, and I hadn't made many friends yet. Honestly, I felt a little invisible, but that day, September 13th, I'll never forget it, was the day everything changed. It started out like any other. I was stuck in geography class all morning. We had back-to-back lessons, which felt endless. By lunchtime, I was exhausted. I grabbed a carton of juice from the cafeteria, and because we weren't allowed to bring drinks back into class, I chugged the whole thing before the bell rang. That turned out to be an important detail, because about 20 minutes into the next lesson, I felt my stomach cramp. I needed the bathroom badly. Normally, teachers hated when students asked to leave during class. They'd always say, "You had lunch, why didn't you go then?" But I didn't care. I raised my hand and asked anyway. Mr. Carter, my geography teacher, looked annoyed but eventually nodded. "Be quick," he muttered. So I slipped out into the empty hallway. The silence was immediate and strange. During lessons, the whole school went still. Classrooms full, teachers lecturing, students scribbling notes, hallways became ghost towns. I pushed through the double doors into the cafeteria, empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above, reflecting off the clean tables. The absence of noise made my footsteps echo. I hurried across the room, through another set of doors, and down the side corridor toward the bathrooms. Relief. Then hand washing. Then back out the door. Everything was normal. Until I stepped back into the cafeteria. That's when I saw him. A man sitting alone at one of the tables. At first glance, it didn't strike me as unusual. Adults sometimes wandered through, teachers, staff, parents visiting. But something about him was off. He wasn't eating. He wasn't reading papers or looking at his phone. He was just sitting there. And the moment I noticed him, he looked straight at me. "Hey," he said. I jumped, letting out a tiny squeal before I could stop myself. I wasn't used to strangers talking to me, and the sound of his voice in the empty cafeteria startled me. He chuckled softly. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you." I forced a nervous smile and started to walk past him. That's when I noticed the lanyard around his neck. Relief washed over me. He must have been a teacher. Except, his ID was flipped backward, the way students wore theirs when they didn't want anyone to see their picture. That should have set off alarms in my head. But at 16, shy and eager to please, I didn't think much of it. "Could you help me with something?" he asked. I stopped. 2 men, hiding. The back door cracked open, and in that split second, everything clicked. This wasn't a teacher, this wasn't normal, and I was in danger. I froze, staring at the figures in the car. The man beside me turned, saw my expression, and grabbed my arm. His grip was like iron. By then, I was sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. The police were called. My parents were called. The school went into lockdown. Security footage from the car park confirmed everything. 3 men, one using a stolen student lanyard to gain access to the school. Their plan had been simple: find a girl walking alone, lure her outside, and force her into the car. And I had nearly been that girl. They were caught within days. Attempted kidnapping, possession of fake IDs, trespassing on school grounds. The man with the flipped lanyard was not a teacher. He had never worked at any school. He'd simply found a student's ID on the ground outside the building. That little piece of plastic nearly changed my life forever. I didn't go back to school for 2 weeks. When I finally did, everyone looked at me differently. Teachers, classmates, even the headmaster. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was the girl who had almost been taken. Therapy helped. Time helped. But I still replay those moments in my head. The walk through the cafeteria, the silence in the car park, the grip on my arm. And sometimes, when I dream, I see the faces waiting in the car, grinning, hungry, waiting for me to make the wrong choice. I screamed and bolted sideways, slamming into the living room. 2 figures now, one descending the stairs, one dragging itself from the basement. I ran for the window, slammed the knife against the glass until it cracked, splintered, finally gave way. I dove through, glass tearing at my arms, and landed hard on the frozen lawn. I scrambled to my feet, sprinted across the yard, and didn't stop until I reached the street. The house loomed behind me, every window dark except one, the basement window. A pale face pressed against the glass, watching. I never went back. The house still sits there, empty, though neighbors say they see movement inside at night. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear that voice again, muffled but clear. You shouldn't be down here. And every time my phone buzzes with an unknown number, I'm terrified it won't just be spam, that it will be them, waiting.